The ship drifted silently through the empty void of space, a hulking mass of broken metal and fractured dreams. Captain Xyler's eyes scanned the dark expanse, her heart racing, as the comms officer confirmed the find for the third time. A ship lost to the stars long ago, a relic from a time before humanity even knew how to dream of the cosmos. The team of explorers aboard the Elysium was the first to encounter the ship that had not shown up on any galactic map, and now it floated in front of them, a broken monument to some forgotten war. Xyler leaned over the captain's chair, her fingers hovering over the control console, ready to give the order to approach the ship. A chill ran down her spine. Something about it felt wrong, but she couldn't deny the allure of its mystery. It was like a calling that tugged at the very core of her being. Lieutenant Kira stood beside her, her voice laced with hesitation, as she stared at the alien ship. "Captain, are you sure we should board this thing? We don't know what kind of dangers it holds." Xyler turned to her and nodded, a determined look in her eyes. "We've come this far, Kira. There's no turning back now." The crew was silent, each member focused on their task, knowing that the potential discoveries hidden within the ship could change everything about humanity's place in the galaxy. There was a collective understanding that this moment could alter the course of history itself, and yet the closer they got, the more the silence aboard the Elysium deepened, as if the very ship in front of them demanded respect. The alien vessel was massive even in its ruined state. Its dark hull stretched far beyond the length of their own ship, twisted metallic spires reaching toward the cold black sky, like the broken bones of some fallen titan. As they docked with the derelict ship, Xyler felt a strange sensation, a pulse beneath her feet, as if the ship was still alive, its damaged systems flickering with the last remnants of energy. As the crew prepared to board, a soft hum resonated through the ship's structure, the kind of hum that spoke of something ancient and powerful hidden beneath the surface. The boarding party assembled quickly, Xyler leading them through the airlock, with Kira Derek, the ship's scientist, and a small group of armed security personnel behind her. The air inside the ship was stale and cold, their flashlights cutting through the darkness, revealing long corridors filled with strange markings glowing faintly in the shadows. Xyler's breath quickened as she took in the sight of the ship, its walls covered in intricate alien symbols that pulsed softly like a living thing. Every turn seemed to open a new room filled with discarded equipment and debris, remnants of an empire long gone. They came upon a central chamber, a vast open space at the heart of the ship. An altar of sorts sat in the center, the structure itself strange and biomechanical, unlike anything human technology had ever produced. Derek stepped forward, her scanner buzzing, as she examined the strange interface embedded within the altar. "Captain," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "you need to see this." Xyler stepped closer, her eyes widening, as she saw what lay within the altar, a dormant creature, its form a grotesque fusion of organic and mechanical parts. Curled in the center, it was unlike anything they had encountered before, its body covered in what appeared to be protective plating. Its eyes were closed, its limbs folded in on itself, almost as if it were waiting for something. Xyler felt a cold shiver crawl down her spine as she studied the creature's still form. Something in her gut told her they had found far more than just an abandoned warship. Xyler stared at the dormant creature frozen in the altar, its form both terrifying and beautiful, a twisted masterpiece of alien technology. Its body glimmered faintly in the light, casting strange reflections across the chamber. Derek knelt beside it, carefully scanning its surface, as if trying to decipher its secrets. "Captain," she said, her voice tinged with both awe and caution, "this is something far beyond anything we've ever encountered." Xyler nodded, not quite sure whether to be terrified or excited by the discovery. "What do you mean?" she asked. Derek looked up, her face pale as she studied the creature further. "This is not just an artifact. This is a weapon, a biological weapon, unlike anything we've ever seen," she said softly. "It's part machine, part living organism, like a symbiotic entity. But its structure, it's too complex. We can't even begin to comprehend how it works." Xyler felt her breath catch. She had heard rumors of such things, ancient races creating sentient weapons designed to destroy entire civilizations. But to see it in front of her was another matter entirely. The idea that something like this had once been wielded by an alien empire was both fascinating and terrifying. The hum in the air intensified for a moment, as if the ship itself was reacting to their presence. Dr. Kira stepped closer to the altar, a hesitant hand reaching out toward the creature. "Should we wake it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ilara frowned, her instincts screamed at her to back away from this unknown force. But she couldn't ignore the pull of discovery, the promise of knowledge that lay just beyond her reach. "We're not leaving here without answers," Ilara said firmly, prepared to activate the interface. Derelict's fingers hovered over the console embedded into the altar, the markings glowing brighter in response as she hesitated, her mind racing with the implications of what they were about to do. Finally, she pressed a series of commands into the device. The moment her fingers made contact with the control, a pulse of energy rippled through the ship, a low hum vibrating through the walls. As the creature's eyes snapped open, glowing with an eerie, unnatural light, the room seemed to grow colder as the thing's limbs shifted, its body stretching, as if waking from a long slumber. The crew stood frozen in place as the creature's gaze swept over them, its eyes ancient and calculating. "You have awoken me," it spoke, its voice reverberating through their minds, cold and metallic, yet strangely familiar. "I am Xyler." Ilara's heart skipped a beat as the words echoed in her mind. "Xyler," she repeated uncertainly. The name felt alien and old, as though the creature itself had witnessed the fall of empires. Xyler's gaze locked onto Ilara, its expression unreadable as it surveyed the humans around it. "I have seen your kind before," it said. "You are nothing but children stumbling through the remnants of a dead universe. Yet you have the audacity to awaken me." Ilara's voice was steady despite the unease settling in her chest. "We need to know what you are," she said. "What is your purpose?" Xyler let out a low, almost amused hum. "I was created to destroy. I was the last hope of an empire that sought to rule all that they could see, but their arrogance led to their undoing." It paused, as though considering its next words. "I am a weapon, a tool of war, forged from the bones of a civilization long lost. But you, human, you are different." Xyler's eyes seemed to glow brighter as it turned its focus entirely on Ilara. "You possess the key to unlocking what I have to offer. You have proven yourself worthy of my power." Ilara felt a strange tug deep inside her chest, as if something ancient was calling to her. But she fought it down, keeping her gaze steady on the creature. "What is it that you offer?" she asked cautiously. Xyler's voice echoed once more as the ship's lights flickered ominously. "Knowledge, power, control over the very fabric of reality itself. But be warned," it continued, its tone darker. "Once you tap into this power, you will no longer be just human." Ilara's breath caught in her throat as the weight of the creature's words settled over her. "What happens then?" she asked softly. Xyler's answer was a low, ominous whisper. "You will become something more, and yet something less than what you were." The silence in the chamber was suffocating after Xyler's words. The creature's gaze never wavered, its eyes glowing with an unsettling intensity. Ilara's mind raced as she tried to process the enormity of what was happening. "You said that once I tap into your power, I'll no longer be human," she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What do you mean?" Xyler's expression remained unreadable, its mechanical features almost organic in their stillness. "The power I offer is not just knowledge, it is the ability to reshape reality itself." Xyler spoke slowly, each word heavy with meaning. "To control the forces that bind the universe together, the very energy that sustains the stars." Ilara swallowed hard as the weight of the creature's words sank in. The others were silent, watching as Ilara stood before the being, unsure whether to take a step forward or retreat. They had all sensed the potential for greatness that lay within the alien technology, but now it felt like they were standing at the edge of something far darker than they could have imagined. "And what do you want in return?" Ilara asked finally, her voice steady, but her heart pounding. Xyler's eyes glinted as it spoke. "Nothing but your will," it replied. "Your mind must become one with me, your essence must merge with the power I offer. Only then can you unlock the true potential of what I am." Ilara felt the pull again. It was subtle at first, like a whisper at the back of her mind, but it grew louder, more insistent, as the creature's power began to seep into her consciousness. Images flashed before her eyes. Visions of galactic wars, entire worlds consumed by fire, civilizations reduced to dust in an instant. She could feel Xyler's power coursing through her veins, like an electric current burning bright and hot with possibility and danger. The thought of controlling such power was intoxicating yet terrifying at the same time. "What will I become?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice calm. "You will become the vessel for my power," Xyler replied, its voice echoing within her mind. "But you will not be the same as before. You will be something beyond your understanding." Derelict stepped forward, her face pale with a mixture of awe and fear. "Captain," she said, her voice trembling, "this isn't just about gaining knowledge. This is about control. Once you bond with Xyler, there will be no going back." Xyler glanced at her science officer, feeling the weight of her words. "I know," Xyler replied quietly, "but the alternative is letting this power fall into the wrong hands, letting others use it to enslave or destroy." She turned back to Xyler. "If I accept your offer, how do I begin?" The creature's eyes softened slightly as it spoke. "You must surrender yourself to me, allow the bond to take hold, and I will awaken the full force of what I am inside you." Xyler hesitated for a long moment, the choice before her both a blessing and a curse. She had always prided herself on her strength, her ability to lead her crew through the most dangerous situations. But now that strength felt like something fragile, something insignificant. In the face of this kind of power, she could feel the pull of something greater calling her deeper into the unknown. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, looking down into a chasm too vast to comprehend. "Do you understand what this means?" Xyler's voice reverberated again in her mind. "You will no longer be bound by human limitations. You will see the universe as few have ever seen it. You will control the forces that shape the fabric of reality itself." Xyler closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, she was no longer sure who she was or who she would become. The decision was made. She could feel Xyler's power reaching out to her like a hand, pulling her into the depths of a new existence. "I accept," she said, her voice filled with a strange resolve. With that, Xyler's power surged through her, the world around her fading. As her consciousness merged with the alien entity for the first time, Xyler felt herself becoming something more than human, something both terrifying and exhilarating. The moment Xyler accepted Xyler's offer, her body was flooded with energy, a searing heat that coursed through her veins like liquid fire. She could feel every cell in her body vibrating as though she were being remade from the inside out. Visions of galaxies collapsed into themselves, and stars, born and destroyed, filled her mind. She saw civilizations rise and fall in the blink of an eye, and felt the weight of untold knowledge press against her skull. Every thought seemed both her own and not her own. The power inside her was overwhelming yet intoxicating. As the fusion of mind and machine took hold, the world around her seemed to fade into a blur. Her body no longer felt like her own as she became something else, entirely, something far greater. When she opened her eyes again, the darkness of the alien ship's chamber was gone, replaced by a vibrant hum of energy that she could feel with every fiber of her being. The crew was still there, standing around her in silence, their eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. But Xyler was no longer the woman they had known. She stood taller. Somehow her presence felt immense, like a force of nature made manifest. Her voice, when she spoke, was deep and resonant like Xyler's, but still undeniably hers. "We have to move quickly," she said, her tone calm, but filled with an urgency that was impossible to ignore. "The Xyler will sense this power, and they will come for us." Derelict blinked in shock as she stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Captain," she began, "are you all right?" Xyler turned to her, and for the first time felt a flicker of something human deep within her. "I'm not sure," she replied honestly, "but I know what we have now is more than enough to protect humanity." Kira's eyes narrowed as she observed Xyler's transformation. "What do you mean?" she asked carefully, her voice cautious. Xyler smiled, but it was a smile that seemed almost too perfect, too detached. "What we have here is a weapon the likes of which the galaxy has never seen," she said. "We have the power to defend ourselves and to strike back at anyone who dares to threaten us." The crew exchanged uneasy glances, some unsure whether to be relieved or terrified by her words. "You're talking about using this power," Kira said, her voice rising. "You're talking about making us into something like them." Ilara turned her gaze toward Kira, her eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. "We are already something like them," she said softly. "We just didn't know it until now." The word hung heavy in the air. As the crew fell silent, no one daring to speak, as Ilara's presence seemed to fill the room, they all understood the implications of what she had just said. They were no longer the underdogs in this war. They had found something that could make them the masters of their own fate. But at what cost? The decision weighed on Ilara, but it was not a decision she could undo now that the power of Xyler was within her. She could feel it in her every thought, every movement. It was not just a weapon. It was a new form of existence, one that could bend the universe to her will. But the more she explored the depths of this new power, the more she realized the danger it posed not just to her enemies, but to herself as well. She could feel the tug of Xyler's influence growing stronger, with every passing moment whispering in her mind, urging her to embrace the power fully, to unleash it without hesitation, to destroy everything in her path, if that was what was necessary to ensure humanity's survival. But Ilara resisted it for now, the last remnants of her humanity clinging to the edge of her consciousness. "We need to prepare," she said, her voice firm, but still grounded. "We can't wait for the Xyler to strike first." She turned to derelict. "Start analyzing the ship's systems and technology. See if we can integrate them with ours." She looked at Kira. "Get the crew ready. We'll need all hands on deck." As the crew scrambled into action, Ilara stood still, feeling the full weight of what she had become. The power that was now hers was immense and dangerous, but she had made a promise to protect humanity, and she would keep it no matter the cost. Days passed in a blur. The Elysium became a hive of activity as the crew worked tirelessly to harness the alien technology that now pulsed through their ship under Ilara's direction. The ship was transforming. Every system was being upgraded with the powerful weapons and advanced tech they had found on the derelict ship. It felt like an awakening, a rebirth. The energy that flowed through the vessel now was something new. It hummed with the promise of dominance and power. Ilara stood on the bridge, feeling the pulse of the ship's new heart beneath her feet. She could sense every movement, every change with terrifying clarity. Kira approached her quietly, her face etched with concern. "Captain, we've intercepted a transmission from the Xyler," she said, her voice low. "They've detected our use of the alien technology. They're preparing to launch a full-scale assault." Ilara's eyes darkened as she turned to face Kira. "They're coming for us." Then she said calmly, "Let them come." Her words were cold with finality, but beneath the surface, there was a fire that had been kindled inside her, a fire that burned with the need to prove humanity's strength to the galaxy and to herself. The Xyler had long seen humanity as insignificant, a primitive species scrambling to survive on the fringes of the galaxy. Their empire had been built on the subjugation of weaker species, and humanity had never been a threat in their eyes. But that was about to change. Ilara could feel the Xyler's arrogance in her bones. They had no idea what they were about to face. The Elysium launched without hesitation, a fleet of newly retrofitted ships. Following in its wake, they cut through the darkness of space toward the Xyler's forward base, a massive fortress orbiting a barren planet. Their intelligence indicated that the Xyler were preparing to strike at Earth and the colonies, but Ilara had no intention of waiting for them to make the first move. The time for hiding was over. It was time for humanity to show the galaxy what they had become. As they approached the Xyler base, Ilara felt the power inside her surge again. It was like an electrical current running through her veins. Her fingers itched to unleash it. She could sense the fear in her crew, but they trusted her. She was no longer just their captain. She was something else now, their leader in a war they hadn't asked for, but would now fight to the death. The battle began with a roar. The Xyler fleet was formidable, but the humans were no longer weak. They were armed with weapons of unimaginable power. The first volley of fire from the Elysium cracked the Xyler defenses like brittle glass. A burst of energy tore through the enemy's flagship and exploded it into a cloud of debris. Ilara watched as the shockwaves rippled outward, consuming the enemy ships in an unstoppable wave. The Xyler ships tried to retaliate, but their weapons were no match for the advanced tech now at humanity's disposal. The power of Xyler surged through Ilara, and the ship like a tidal wave. Each command she gave was executed with precision and efficiency. Her mind and the ship's systems were as one. The Xyler commanders were caught off guard. They had expected to face a fledgling fleet at best, but now they were staring down the full might of a force they could never have anticipated. As their fleet scattered in disarray, Xyler gave the order for the final strike. "We're taking the base," she said, her voice cold and resolute. "Prepare for boarding." The Elysium dropped out of hyperspace just above the Xyler base, its weapons fully charged. The crew moved swiftly, their mission clear. They would destroy the base and cripple the Xyler's ability to launch a counteroffensive. But as Xyler led the assault teams into the heart of the base, she felt something shift deep inside her, a growing hunger. The power within her was no longer a tool, it was something alive, something that wanted to consume everything in its path. But for now she resisted. She focused on the mission. The Xyler needed to see what humanity was capable of, and the universe would know that humanity was no longer weak, no longer a prey species, but a force that could reshape the galaxy on their own terms. The Elysium crashed through the defenses of the Xyler base like a hammer through glass. The crew moved swiftly and efficiently, Xyler's orders echoing through the ship's comms. The soldiers aboard the vessel were as focused as she was, each knowing that the outcome of this battle would change the course of history. As the boarding teams deployed, they stormed the base's corridors, weapons blazing. Xyler forces scrambled to respond, but they were too slow, too disorganized. Their arrogance had cost them their superiority, and now they were paying the price. Xyler led the charge herself, her every movement calculated and precise. Her mind seemed to function faster than ever before, her senses heightened to a level that felt almost unnatural. The power of Xyler surged within her, urging her forward. Like a beast on the hunt, she felt the presence of the enemy before they even arrived. The walls themselves seemed to whisper to her. She knew where they were before they knew they were coming. It was like a sixth sense, a gift from the alien entity that now shared her consciousness. The Xyler soldiers were formidable, but they were no match for the enhanced abilities. Xyler now possessed. Her reflexes were lightning quick, her aim unerring with each strike. She felled one after another as the crew followed behind her, their morale bolstered by her presence. The fear that had once lingered in their hearts was replaced with something else, an unspoken sense of awe and pride. As they saw their captain in action, she was no longer just a leader, she was a symbol of humanity's rise from the ashes of the past. Despite the overwhelming power that flowed through her, Xyler's thoughts remained sharp and controlled, but beneath it all there was a gnawing hunger that had begun to grow within her. The more she wielded Xyler's power, the more she could feel it consuming her. Part of her knew that this wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about domination, the desire to reshape the galaxy, to bend it to her will. The temptation was strong and growing stronger with every passing moment. But Xyler held it at bay. For now, the mission came first. They reached the heart of the base, quickly the central control room, where the last line of defense lay. The doors slammed open with a deafening screech, and the remaining Xyler commanders turned to face them, their faces twisted in disbelief. As they saw the humans standing at the threshold, Xyler stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an intensity that sent a ripple of unease through the enemy ranks. "Your empire ends here," she said, her voice calm but filled with authority. "You will surrender or be destroyed." The Xyler commander laughed darkly, his voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can challenge us?" he sneered. "You are nothing but insects trying to swat a star." Xyler didn't flinch, her gaze unwavering. "You don't understand," she said softly. "We're not insects anymore." With a snap of her fingers, the energy from Xyler surged through the room. The very walls seemed to bend with the force of it as bolts of energy erupted from the control systems, disintegrating the Xyler commanders. In an instant, their bodies vaporized before they could even react. The base began to tremble as the power that had once been their lifeblood was now their undoing. Xyler stood there for a moment, her chest rising and falling with the rush of adrenaline, her crew behind her silent, as the aftermath of their victory began to settle in. The Xyler were defeated, but something inside her stirred, something dark and insatiable. The power of Xyler had tasted victory, and it wanted more. As the base began to implode around them, Xyler gave the order to retreat. "Get to the ship," she commanded, her voice steady but her mind was a maelstrom. She could feel the power within her growing more intense. With every passing second, the influence of Xyler was undeniable, and it was beginning to take hold of her completely. They left the base in flames, the remnants of the Xyler Empire crumbling before them. But Xyler knew that this victory was only the beginning. The galaxy would have to recognize humanity's strength, and once they did, she wasn't sure if there would be any turning back. The Elysium returned to the relative safety of deep space. The crew was exhilarated by their victory, but a palpable unease lingered in the air. The overwhelming power that Xyler had harnessed was still fresh in their minds. The ease with which she had decimated the Xyler was unlike anything they had ever seen. Her eyes still glowed faintly with the energy of the ancient alien force that now lived within her, and each time she spoke, her voice seemed to carry an unnatural weight, a resonance that sent shivers down their spines. Derelict was the first to approach her since the battle, her expression cautious as she watched Xyler stand alone on the bridge, staring out into the vast expanse of space. "Captain," she said, her voice careful but firm, "we need to talk." Xyler didn't turn to face her, but she knew Derelict was there, as she always did now. "What is it?" Xyler asked, her voice steady, but there was an undercurrent of something darker beneath the surface. Derelict hesitated before speaking. "Xyler," she began, "this power, it's changing you. We can all see it. You're not the same." Xyler turned slowly, her gaze locking onto the scientist, her eyes glowing with an intensity that made Derelict take a half step back. "What do you mean?" Xyler asked, her voice tinged with something almost amused. "You've been doing things I never thought possible." Derelict continued, "the way you manipulate the ship's systems, as if they're an extension of your own body, the way you sense things before anyone else. It's not just the technology anymore, it's you. You've become something else, something beyond human." Xyler's lips curled into a thin smile. "And what's wrong with that?" she asked, her voice quiet but full of a dangerous edge. Derelict swallowed hard. "It's not natural," she said. "We don't know the full extent of what Xyler is doing to you." Xyler's smile faded, her expression hardening. "You don't trust me," she said, her voice cold and distant. "It's not that," Derelict replied quickly, "but we need to understand what's happening to you before it's too late." Xyler took a step toward, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Too late for what?" she asked. "Too late to turn back," Derelict said softly. "If you keep going down this path, if you keep letting Xyler consume you, there may be nothing left of the woman you were." Xyler's gaze hardened, her thoughts churning with the weight of Derek's words. But the tug of Xyler's power was stronger still, the hunger that had begun to grow in her chest. After their victory, it was impossible to ignore every fiber of her being screamed for more. "I'm still me," Xyler said, though she wasn't sure if she believed it anymore. "I'm still in control." Derelict looked at her with concern. "Are you?" she asked quietly. "Are you truly in control, or is it Xyler that's pulling the strings now?" Xyler opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. For the first time since she had merged with Xyler, she wasn't sure of the answer. She could feel the alien presence stirring within her, like a hungry beast clawing at the edges of her consciousness. "I'm fine," she said finally, though the words felt hollow even to her own ears. "I can handle this." But as she turned away from Derelict and looked out into the endless void of space, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying to herself. The power inside her was too vast, too tempting to control for long, and every victory she claimed only fed it more. It was only a matter of time before she would have to face the truth that she wasn't just wielding power anymore. It was shaping her, becoming a part of her, in ways she could no longer deny. Captain Kira's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see her standing in the doorway of the bridge. "We've received another transmission," she said, her voice strained. "The Xyler aren't done with us. They've called for reinforcements." Xyler's lips twisted into a small smile. "Let them come," she said, her voice a low rumble. "We'll be ready." But as she spoke those words, the hunger inside her grew once again, and she felt the whisper of Xyler in her mind, urging her to embrace it all, to unleash everything she had and more. The transmission from the Xyler was direct and chilling. Their reinforcements were already en route, an armada far larger than the one they had just destroyed. Xyler knew this battle would be different. The Xyler would not make the same mistake twice, But as she sat in the captain's chair aboard the Elysium, she could feel a strange calm settle over her, the power of Xyler thrumming beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. She was no longer afraid of what was coming. The universe had already seen what she was capable of, and now she would show them the full extent of her strength, the full power of humanity. Derelict and Kira stood nearby, their faces tense, but Xyler didn't even glance at them. The crew was ready. They had no choice but to follow her lead. The choice had already been made. The war was no longer about survival. It was about domination, and she would lead humanity into a new era, an era where no one could dare oppose them. "Captain, we're picking up their fleet," Kira said, breaking the silence. "They're coming in fast." Xyler's gaze remained fixed on the view screen as the Xyler ships appeared in the distance, massive hulking warships bristling with weaponry. They had clearly been reinforced and were ready to strike. "Prepare to engage," Xyler said, her voice cold and calm. "Deploy the fleet." The Elysium surged forward, the energy within it crackling like lightning as it sped toward the incoming enemy. The crew worked in unison. Every system was a well-oiled machine, now no longer a scattered group of humans, but a singular force united under Xyler's command. The first salvo from the Xyler struck the Elysium with devastating force, but the ship absorbed it with ease. The alien tech, now embedded in the hull, created an impenetrable barrier. The blast shockwave reverberated across the ship, but inside it was as if nothing had happened. Xyler felt the impact, but there was no fear, only the cold calculation of what needed to be done. "Return fire," she commanded, and the ship unleashed its full might. The Xyler fleet was pounded by the sheer intensity of the energy blasts. The Elysium's weapons, now capable of tearing through the thickest armor with ease. The Xyler didn't expect the power they were facing. Their ships were crippled one by one, their commanders scrambling to regroup. But Xyler felt no mercy as each enemy vessel exploded in a burst of light. She could hear the whispers of Xyler urging her to strike faster, harder, to finish them off without hesitation. But a small part of her clung to the memory of the humanity. She had once been the humanity she was losing with every passing moment. She could see it now, the pattern of destruction. She had become a part of each command she gave brought more devastation. But the hunger inside her only grew stronger. The more she destroyed, the more she wanted to destroy. It was as if the very essence of Xyler was feeding on her desire to conquer, and with each victory the power over her mind and body tightened its grip. Captain Derelict's voice broke through her thoughts. "They're sending in their last line of defense." Xyler turned to look at her, but it felt like she was looking at a stranger. Her emotions were distant, now cold. "Prepare for the final push," she said, her voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "We end this now." The Elysium dove into the heart of the Xyler fleet, weaving between the enemy ships like a predator among prey, its weapons firing on all fronts, cutting through their defenses with ruthless precision. The final battle was a blur of flashing lights and explosions, but Xyler felt nothing except the power coursing through her veins, the power that was now her identity. She had crossed a threshold she could never return from. And then it was over. The Xyler were shattered, their fleet decimated, their strongholds obliterated. In the aftermath, there was nothing left but silence and the charred remains of what had once been an empire. Xyler stood at the helm of the Elysium, her crews standing behind her in stunned silence. They had won, but at what cost? The galaxy had been reshaped, and humanity was no longer the prey but the hunter. But Xyler knew deep down that victory had come with a price she could never pay back. The power of Xyler was no longer just within her, it was her every thought, every breath was consumed by it. She had become the weapon she had once feared, and yet part of her was still alive, still human, still fighting to hold on to what was left of the person she had once been. But as the Elysium sailed into the void, she knew the war was over. The galaxy would remember the day humanity became the most dangerous force in the universe, but so would she remember the price of what it had taken to get there. And that price was her soul.